Hello, and welcome to the Hello Judges podcast, sponsored by Taylors of Harrogate. I'm Will Woodhouse-Banks, and I love coffee competitions. This episode is also sponsored by Danelaw Coffee. Danelaw is a roastery set up to help demystify specialty and make it more approachable without losing the interesting stories behind the producers. Check out Danelaw at www.danelaw.coffee. My guest this week is David Jameson. David has made a name for himself in the industry over the last 16 years, touching base and mastering so many areas of the industry. He's had some flaming hot rides and victories in coffee and good spirits, and he loves a good chat. The weight of this podcast is heavy, the body is juicy, and there is a long, clean finish. Please enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Dave Jameson.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Founder of Danelaw Coffee, Q Grader, 2014 UK Coffee and Good Spirits Champion, 2016 UK Coffee and Good Spirits Champion, World Coffee and Good Spirits Finalist, coach of the 2017 World Champion, and a former World Coffee Events Technical Judge.
All correct. Yes. Hi. All of those things I have done. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds quite good when someone reads it all out at the beginning of a podcast, doesn't it?
It's really easy to forget all of those things. And yeah, no, it sounds amazing to hear all of those things listed next to my name. So thank you very much.
Yeah, a very storied career in the coffee world. Anything else that I've missed out?
I'm a World Coffee Events All-Star.
Yeah.
I have emceed at World Coffee Events and also other coffee competitions beyond the sphere of WCE.
Yeah.
I was a judge at the English AeroPress Championship.
Nice.
I did a bit of emceeing for the Cup Tasters Championship at the World Championships in Budapest. It's great. You know, I feel really privileged to have had so many opportunities thrown my way. It's superb.
Great. And like on this podcast, we can talk about any and all coffee competitions. Like it's not sponsored by WCE. There's nothing along those lines, which I'm sure you'd be relieved to hear. We're just going to be completely open and, easy flowing.
No, cool.
So how are you doing today, Dave? Are you in your new roastery right now?
No, I am still in my home office right now. So this was my roastery until a couple of weeks ago. So you can still see some paraphernalia knocking about in the background there. But this area was full of green coffee until a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
And that trolley had my roaster on it. And I've now moved into a purpose-built is a bit of a stretch, a more purpose-built unit. So I was in the roastery this morning. I popped home to do this call because I have heating in my house and I don't have heating in the roastery.
Excellent. Is the trolley leftover legacy from competition days, or was it purpose bought for roasting?
No, 100%. That is a legacy competition trolley. That is my trolley from 2015 onwards, and it's a good thing to start talking about actually because trolley politics is one of those things that you would never expect to be a thing. But backstage at a competition, you have got your little bit of table that you need to put your stuff on. And any advantage you can get is an advantage that you need to take. So I had my own trolley because it meant that I could set my trolley up how I wanted to, when I wanted to. I wasn't relying on the last competitor finishing to get hold of their trolley so that I could then load my trolley up. I could have it all set up how I wanted to, and I had more space to store my things on. So yeah, I invested, I can't remember how much it was, in a trolley in 2015 during the competition season, just to give me that little bit of competitive advantage.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's quite a good thing that's not often or maybe not ever talked about, but having your own trolley is super useful. Like I took my own trolley to the Manchester Heat of the Barista Championship this year, and it's busy and there might not be much space backstage, and I was just there in the audience with my trolley unpacking. And it takes a lot of stress out of competing if you know you've got everything already.
Yeah, and honestly, anything you can do to reduce your stress whilst competing is worth doing. I used to do quite a lot of mindfulness and visualization. So I would sit silently backstage with my eyes closed, walking through the routine in my head And I'd even do the hand gestures. So I'd be sort of like
Yeah.
shaking and like doing all the hand gestures whilst I was visualizing what I was going to do. So anything you can do to reduce your stress in those moments before competition is critical. So yeah, I have my own trolley.
Excellent. So how did you get started in competitions? Like what sort of kicked it off for you?
Well, back in the murky days of 2013, I was working for a coffee company, and their head of coffee, Q Grader, was quite involved in the judging setup, and they needed new judges, as coffee competitions almost always do. And so they recruited me to start judging. And I went up there. Yes, so 2013, I was just getting into judging, found that I really enjoyed it, and found that I was actually doing okay as well. But one of the things I found as a shortcoming was a lack of empathy with the competitors, because I had never competed. So 2014 rolled around, and I decided I wanted to enter a competition. I thought this will be a really good experience for me. I will have a much better view on how to judge competitors if I have entered a competition and done that. So I signed up to Coffee and Good Spirits. Coffee and Good Spirits, if you're not familiar with it, is a competition that combines coffee and alcohol. You have to create your own cocktails made of coffee and alcohol, and you have to prepare an Irish coffee. So I went away, did some practice, came back with a really good Irish coffee and one other cold cocktail that I could do. And this was literally the only cocktails I could do at this point. And I'd been working for a specialty coffee roaster for 3 months at this point. Entered the competition, and to the surprise of absolutely everybody, I won it. And so here I am. I can only make 2 cocktails, and I've only been working for a specialty roaster for 3 months, and I'm on my way to the World Championships in Melbourne, where I'm expected to deliver more cocktails than that and know what I'm talking about. And so suddenly I had this ramp up of learning where I had to become world class overnight, and that doesn't happen. So I didn't do so well in Melbourne. I still finished 9th, so a top 10 finish in my second ever, top 10 finish in the world in my second ever coffee competition. I was quite pleased with. And then I just got on this journey to learn more about it and find out how to be a better competitor. And that's what pushed me on to keep learning and keep growing. And it's been a really fulfilling journey. I've got a lot from competitions. There's no denying how much competitions have influenced my career, influenced my life, and how important they've been to me.
Yeah, like there's no doubt that competition definitely acts as a pressure cooker for accelerating, personal growth and skills for anyone who competes.
Yeah, I completely agree. And when you're on that stage and it's just you and the judges and the audience, you absolutely have to know what you're talking about. So you have to get under the skin of whatever it is you're presenting, whether that be an Irish coffee or a signature drink that you've built yourself or an espresso from a particular producer. You have to know everything about that.
Yeah, for sure. Aside from the rapid advancement of skills, what other benefits to individuals do you think there are from competing?
There are so many things that you pick up as part of coffee competitions. So there's the advancement of skills, there's the confidence of presentation, there's a level of organization as well that's required, because the logistics that go into a competition are insane. We spoke about the trolley, which is just one example of how you need to prepare yourself. But I competed in 2016. I was in the World Championship in Shanghai. And to get me to the World Championship in Shanghai, I needed 5 suitcases. I was traveling on my own, and I had 5 full-size suitcases to take with me. And I landed in Shanghai. It was a long flight. I was really tired. I got off the plane, and my luggage didn't follow me. And I'm there in Shanghai. I don't speak a word of Chinese. I have a hotel booking for the night, but I don't know how to get to the hotel. And I have no luggage at all. And so I eventually found myself in a taxi, which was way more expensive than it needed to be, in my hotel room 2 days before a world championship with absolutely nothing. So I didn't even have a spare pair of pants, let alone a clever dripper or a bottle of whiskey. So fortunately, my luggage did arrive before the competition started. But, then trying to maneuver all of that stuff from my hotel room to the event and back again every day, it's just a nightmare. And all of these kind of hidden logistical costs go on in the background.
Yeah.
And actually, that was really useful for 2017 when I coached the world champion Martin Hudak, because I knew how stressful that had been for me to try and organise. And so, as part of his coaching team, I took on all of that responsibility. So Martin didn't need to worry about where his luggage was going to be, or how his coffee was going to get turned up, or who was making his cold brew. All of those things were done for him, so he could just focus on getting on stage and performing.
Yeah, amazing. Like, being a successful competitor, the majority of the time is about having an amazing team around you.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So, being involved with competitions, has that, and being successful in these competitions, has that opened many doors for you career-wise or other opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think it would be fair for me to say that without the competitions, without the success I've enjoyed in those competitions, I definitely wouldn't be where I am. So I have had job opportunities that have come up because people have seen me performing. I've had job opportunities that have come up because people have known who I am because I have performed in competitions. And without the competition influence, I don't think that would have happened for me. It's a really competitive industry, coffee, particularly when you get into the kind of back of house, roasting, coffee selection, quality control, sourcing side of things. Those bits are really difficult to find good, successful roles in. And actually, things like the competitions become increasingly important to differentiate yourself from other people in those spaces. So
Yeah.
I don't think without my competition history I would have got the jobs I've had in the past. And those jobs have shaped who I am, have shaped what I do. And Danelaw, my roasting business, I have launched off the back of the experience I've had as a result of the jobs I've done in the industry, which I think I've got because of the competition success. So I can't do anything but boil it down to that being the kind of the genesis of my success.
Amazing. Yeah, I think there was a temper tantrum where I remember Dale Harris talked about his experience after winning the world championship, and Stephen Layton was like, "Okay, so like I assume with all this success you're going to go somewhere else now," and Dale was like, "No, I like being at Has Been," and there's no doubting that doing these things does open doors for people.
Yeah, it's interesting where that story ended, actually, with Stephen Layton leaving Has Been and Dale still being there.
Yeah, very interesting. But I feel like that's a story for a different podcast.
Probably, yeah. So, yeah, for me, it's very difficult leaving one company where you've had great success and moving to a different one. I often liken the coffee competitions to being a little bit like running a Formula One team. There's no one really making money out of running coffee competitions. Certainly as a roaster, it's an investment that you're making in your marketing as much as anything else. It gives you credibility, it gives you presence, it gives you something to talk about that's a bit different with your audience. So it's really positive from all of those angles. But I don't think running competition teams as a roaster brings you back a return on that investment in terms of sales. I think it is an investment in presence, positioning, and awareness.
Yeah,
and having
absolutely.
worked for someone who's invested in me, has given me superb coffees and helped me to travel the world and compete in coffee, it was a really difficult decision when I left Union, who I won my championships with, and moved to Grumpy Mule. But yeah, a big part of that for me was geography. So I needed to be back up north, and so that's one of the reasons why I moved.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was kind of emulate that success with Grumpy Mule. And it's amazing how the differences in team structure, coffee availability, coffee quality have such a big impact on how you perform. And there are loads of things that I took from my time at Union that's been really valuable for me. Loads of things I took from my time at Grumpy Mule that were really valuable for me. But one of the things I was never able to replicate was that kind of competition success. I never won another competition after I left Union, and I still really wish I had done. Now, there were some external factors as well, which may have influenced that. There's this fella who occasionally throws the odd coffee cocktail together, won a couple of world championships. He was competing in the UK at the same time as my Grumpy Mule years. And so it's some pretty stiff competition from Dan Fellows. And, beating Dan Fellows on his best day is a tough ask. So, maybe that was it. Maybe if I'd competed against someone other than Dan Fellows, maybe I would have come out with some championships from Grumpy Mule, but I didn't. And that team change, that availability of coffee, trying to find new coffees that will match up to what I'd used in the past, that was really difficult to keep that consistency going.
Yeah. Arguably, if Dan Fellows didn't have somebody like you to compete against, then that might not have pushed him to the level that he reached. I was talking about this the other day, that having like such a good culture for competition only, produces better national champions, right?
Oh, completely agree. I'm really proud, actually, of how the UK has come on over the last few years with particularly coffee and good spirits. So if you wind the clock back to 2013, there were 3 or maybe 4 people, I think, competing in coffee and good spirits in the UK. 2014, there were 4 of us. And now the competition sells out on the first 10 minutes of being released. We've built a competition in the UK that's credible, that is respected, that is admired. I remember James Hoffman back in 2014 saying, "This is embarrassing. There's no one competing in coffee and good spirits. We should just knock it on the head and stop doing it." And I took that personally. Like, no, I'm going to go and make this the best competition we can have. And I pushed really hard in those early couple of years to try and grow awareness, popularity, and respect for that competition. Having that really stiff competitive nature with a rival, a stiff rival. And Dan and I get on really well. We're good mates. He describes me as his best frenemy. I describe him as my nemesis. We have this really kind of positive, competitive relationship. But out of that competition, you had me and Dan competing in the UK. Martin Hudak, who was the 2017 world champion, competed for Slovakia but was based in the UK. Rusty, who's the guy who's won Coffee Masters, he's won Coffee and Good Spirits this year in the UK. He's come out of that scene as well. He used to work with Martin at the Savoy. So it's all come out of the same kind of melting pot of people. And of course, Dan has won the World Championship 2 years in a row. Martin won it before that. I was a finalist the year before that. Sang Ho Park, who was at Square Mile at the time, was a finalist the year before that. The competition we've created from the UK has been really kind of up there. Coffee and Good Spirits was dominated by Greek competitors for years. And it was a running joke that every year the winner would be a Greek competitor using 90 plus coffee. And for years and years and years, that was the case. And when Martin finally did break that in 2017, we actually produced a kind of a limited edition packaging in the style of 90 plus with Martin's silhouette spraying with champagne at the moment of victory. So that's how ingrained it was that the Greeks just won Coffee and Good Spirits every year. And through that kind of fierce competition in the UK with me and Dan and a load of others besides, that's how I think we've pushed the standard and the quality of coffee cocktails in the UK as high as they have got. And they've become mainstream. They've become really popular. We've achieved what we set out to 10 years ago, which is that we've made coffee cocktails better as a result of pushing, promoting, and being behind them. And it's worked.
Yeah, there's been a huge shift. Absolutely. So thinking about Coffee and Good Spirits and world championships, or whether it be national, aside from your own and Martin's routines, do you have any memorable Coffee and Good Spirits routines that you enjoyed, that have stayed in your head?
It's a funny thing. I spent years really trying to not watch Coffee and Good Spirits routines because I wanted to focus solely on what I did, because what everybody else did wasn't really important to me. I had to do the best I could.
Yeah.
So I spent years avoiding them and just not paying attention. And there's been a degree of kind of convergent evolution that's happened as a result of that, because great ideas that have happened several places at the same time. So I remember one year turning up with the same rum as Dan, because we'd both used coffee from El Salvador and had both chosen an El Salvadorian rum to pair with it because it made sense. And it was totally unintentional. I had no idea that's what he was doing. There was another year where we both used cinnamon to make fire because we both had the same idea at the same time. And so this convergent evolution meant that we were doing really similar things at the same time. One thing that does stick in my mind, which I think is kind of underused actually. 2014 world champion was Matt Perger from Australia. People will know from Barista Hustle.
Yeah.
He was a professional competitor at the time. He'd won Brewers Cup. He'd come second in the World Barista Championship. He was the guy who popularised the use of the EK43 grinder, for example. And I know the judge who actually judged him during that routine, and he got on stage and did his pre-stage inspection and said, "God, this idiot's forgotten to bring a grinder," because he didn't recognise it because it was such an unusual thing at that point. But Matt's World Championship routine in 2014 had some really unique features to it. So he served a hot cocktail, which is mandatory in the early rounds. But to heat his cocktail up, what he did is he got a tamper and put a blowtorch to the end of it and heated this tamper up. And it was a tamper on a big stick. So he kind of welded a length of rebar or something to this tamper. And then he put a blowtorch on it to heat the bottom of the tamper up. And once the tamper was kind of glowing red hot, he put it into the vessel that his cocktail was in and used that to heat the vessel. And that was really spectacular. It was a really impressive, showy thing because there's bubbles everywhere and you got this fire on stage. And I've never seen anyone do anything like it before or since. And it is a legitimate cocktail technique, but you'd usually use a poker like you'd have in the house for the fire. Yeah. And Matt had adapted this by using a tamper instead. That was really memorable. Some of the other competition routines, I remember, again, going back to my mate Dan Fellows, his 2016 World Barista Championship routine was just beautiful. He had this gorgeous soundtrack. It was Sigur Rós or something, and the music kind of swelled and rose up at the climax of his routine as dry ice spilled out across the stage, and the whole thing was poetic. It was a beautiful, beautiful routine, and those are the ones that really stick in the mind.
Yeah,
the ones that bring a lump to the throat and a tear to the eye are just wonderful to watch.
2016 was Dublin, right?
Yes, I'm pretty sure it was Dublin.
Yeah.
I think that was Dan's WBC year.
Nice. Yeah. So, which kind of segues quite nicely into the fact that I remember you were a tech judge that year at the World Championships.
Yeah, I was. I tech judged at the World Championships that year, and I saw some tremendous routines that year as well. Levels of kind of technical precision that I didn't know were achievable, and some superb competitors. I judged Lem Butler from the States. I judged Erna Tosberg from Germany, and those stuck in my mind for being particularly technically proficient. I think in a slightly, I look back on it now and it's slightly embarrassing. The notes I wrote on Erna's score sheet were ruthlessly proficient or ruthlessly technically proficient or something like that. And yeah, I really kind of tapping into that kind of German stereotype of efficiency and so on, which feels a bit embarrassing now, but it seemed okay in 2016.
Yeah. So how was your experience of judging at the world level?
So one of the things that I found in my early career, particularly when judging, was how challenging it was to be put in front of people who were clearly streets ahead. So I remember judging Dale Harris in my first competition year and being like, "Guy, I can't judge this fella. He's so much better than I am. How do I judge him?" And we did a judge's workshop and he asked me a question and I was like, "I can't answer that. You're Dale Harris." By the time I'd got to the 2016 World Championship, I'd just competed in Shanghai a few months earlier. I was pretty confident in my own abilities, and I was there as a world judge, as a world finalist. I felt like I was okay to be on stage with these guys, but still, the level was just something else. And I remember marking competitors' score sheets, taking them backstage, and having more experienced judges than me, gently reminding me of what the rules were, gently reminding me of where the kind of score benchmarks were, gently steering me to adjust my scores slightly to put them back in line with where they needed to be. And that wasn't something I was particularly comfortable with because I was quite confident in myself at that point.
Yeah.
And I knew that I was going to be bringing marks down for things that I'd observed. I knew that I would be, taking stuff out of my score sheets that actually I was quite happy to stand by. And one of the competitors actually published his score sheets afterwards, and he was one of the guys where I'd kind of had to round down because my scores weren't in line with what everybody else had experienced. And And I was a bit nervous about that, but he was actually quite positive, and he was quite pleased with the feedback he'd had. He was quite happy that I'd gone and taken the time to give him detailed technical feedback on his performance. So it was the right thing to do in the end, but I wasn't very comfortable with it at the time.
Yeah.
And the reminder that despite being a world finalist, despite having the credibility I felt like I needed to be there were still more experienced judges who'd seen way more routines than me, who knew what they were doing. That kind of reset me and put me back into the right position, the right kind of frame of mind.
Great. So something I don't know the full story of, and more than happy to edit it out if it's something that you don't want to talk about. But I believe there was a bit of a disagreement between yourself and whether it be WCE or SCA. Do you want to fill us in a little bit on that?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this. I don't want to dredge it up too much because I'm really over it, and I really have got to the point of just not caring. So I think it would have been the 2018 championship, which took place in, I think, September 17. I got this routine together, which I was really proud of. It was immensely technically difficult and complicated, and I had to trim the runtime down by about 5 minutes because it was so overstuffed with stuff. And I had, as I always do, I had my soundtrack lined up with musical cues. And so I knew what the time was going to be based on what the soundtrack was doing. And I knew that I was getting to the end of my time, and I was really, really running short of time. And so the finale to this routine was I had 2 blowtorches set up on stage with fire shooting out of them as I cascaded cinnamon through the flames over the top of my drinks, which shot up in gushes of flame and was spectacular. It was great. So I did this. Fire went out, called time, and I realised that my drinks weren't in the right place on the table because I'd done all of this over a tray and I hadn't put them directly in front of the judges. So after I just called the time, picked the drinks up, put them in front of the judges. Now, absolutely an error. Definitely got that wrong. Definitely wasn't the right thing. Should have left them where they were. Judges could have reached them. Wasn't a big problem. The conflict arose fundamentally as a result of a difference of opinion in the interpretation of the rules. So I knew that I'd made a mistake here. I knew that there was going to be some kind of sanction, some kind of penalty. But I felt like the routine was strong enough and had done well enough that I should still be able to make the final.
Yeah.
So I was quite shocked when I didn't. And when I went back to get my feedback later on, I was very shocked indeed as to what had happened. And basically what they did is they decided that those drinks hadn't been served. And there's no definition of what serving drinks is in the rules. And there's no guidance as to what the penalty might be if you didn't serve a drink in the rules. But the penalty they applied is that they just didn't score those drinks at all. None of the technical, none of the sensory. Wrote off half of my score sheet, which meant it was impossible to reach the final.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was quite angry about that because you've got judges here who aren't competing, and in that case, haven't competed. And you've got judges here who have taken a decision that they're going to take an established competitor who's invested a lot of time, money, energy, and knowledge into this routine and punish them in such an over-the-top fashion that they will not compete any further in that routine. And I was, I felt like it was heavy-handed. I felt like it was over the top. But more than anything else, there was no precedent to do that. There was no guidance at all as to why that should be the case. So I appealed it because by this point, I'd already decided I wasn't competing again. And I know that appealing a judgment is a negative thing. Loads of marks in the score sheet are around attitude and your presence as an ambassador, and that arguing with the WCE is not something that is good or viewed positively in that environment. So I knew at this point, if I appealed it, I'm finished. There's never going to be a way back for me. So I appealed it, and to the surprise of nobody, my appeal was rejected. And it went straight through to, I ended up having a Teams call with the heads of Specialty Coffee Association's competitions arm. But it was rejected. I accepted their rejection and in turn rejected them. But, it's one of those annoying things. There was an error made, should have done something differently, but I didn't feel like the punishment was appropriate to to what had happened in that day. And what I wanted was to be able to be in the final with my routine prepared and be able to take on the best in the world head to head and see how I got on with that. And I didn't get that opportunity, which still kind of stings a little bit, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a fair representation. Like, I hadn't heard the full story, and it's really interesting. Some of the points that you made are other things I've talked about with other people. Like, in the rules in the Barista Championship, I feel like adding a glossary to the end of it with definitions of what is meant by is this served, like, is putting it on the judges table enough? Do you have to put it right in front? Like, I'm coaching potential future competitor at the moment. We were specifically looking at that, like, what counts as being served. So I think
I remember again in sort of 13, 14, 15, there being a massive debate about whether the language you used was correct for Barista Championship. So you talk about flavor descriptors, and if you described something as having lemon acidity, that wasn't the flavor descriptor. Despite the fact that if you walk up to someone with a lemon meringue pie and say to them, "This has got lemon acidity," they'll know it tastes like lemon. If you say that in a coffee competition, they don't know it tastes like lemon, because lemon acidity is describing how high the acidity level is.
Yeah.
And I always thought that was unnecessarily picky, and also quite exclusionary to people who weren't competing in their first language. So if you were competing in a second language, if you were learning English to do that competition and you didn't know that nuance, that was going to count against you. So I never agreed with that rule. And it's similar to this. We've got ambiguity and there are errors in the rules and in the judging that there isn't a contingency for. So there wasn't a precedent for what do you do if someone's moved their drinks after time. There just wasn't a precedent for it.
Yeah. So I don't want to poke the flames, or I don't want to cancel anybody either, but I recall a certain UK Barista Championship final where the competitor called time with their sig drinks still in their hands. And
interesting.
Just thought I'd let you hear that.
That's an interesting point. Now, yeah. I guess my response to that really is, who cares?
Yeah.
It's all water under the bridge. It's done. It's passed. Maybe I don't know if that was before or after my competition. So maybe they learned from my experience and applied a slightly more flexible approach. Who knows?
Maybe.
But, yeah. What disappoints me most about this whole thing, to be honest, is the fact that I had the most to lose from this. I was the most upset by this happening. And I kind of got to the point of acceptance, moving on. And I really want to give something back again, because I've got so much from these coffee competitions. I want to be able to contribute back again. And so, I have volunteered in the past to do things with World Coffee events. They were short of someone to help present once on a stage, and I volunteered to help them. And after initially saying, yeah, sure, they then went back and said, "Oh no, we don't want you to do that." Some people backstage aren't happy with that. And again, I wanted to return to judging, because that's where I started. That's what I did. I was a judge before anything else. And so I said, I'm available. I've got time. I can come and judge. And there are individuals still operating within the UK chapter of the coffee goods of the coffee competitions sector who don't want me to be present. They still hold grudges based on this competition that took place 5 years ago, and I just think that's really sad. If I had the most to lose out of this, I feel like I'm over it and I can move on. I want to go back and contribute, but I'm not allowed to. I'm not able to go back and contribute because there are personal grudges still at play.
Yeah,
and I just feel like that's really not okay.
I feel like you should add to your LinkedIn bio, Dave Jameson, assumed troublemaker.
Yeah, bête noire of the coffee cocktail competition world. Yeah.
Okay, so thinking about lightening things up and giving back, have you got any advice that you'd give to anybody who's thinking about competing for the first time?
Treat it as a learning experience. I would say. Don't go in there planning to win a competition, because every time I've gone in planning to win something, I haven't, and it's been far worse. It's been far harder, and it's been much more disruptive. So go in there with an open mind as a learning experience. I think there is value in the judging. Although the judges are not flawless, although the judges don't get it right every time, the judges can give you good feedback that will help you become a better barista, become a better. They're not perfect, but they will help you. Don't go into it thinking you're going to win, because the vast majority of people who enter coffee competitions don't win them. And be prepared for what that feels like, because it sucks and it's really, really no fun. Not winning coffee competitions is one of the worst things in the world.
Yeah, definitely it is. Like, I was talking to Paul Ross yesterday, and we were talking about, like, at the world championship level, 50 countries enter,
Yeah.
and 49 people are going to go home feeling sore.
Yes. And all of those people have gone in there wanting to win that competition.
Yeah.
And it sucks when you don't. So, yeah, also kind of look at your other competitors, see who you gel with, see who you connect with, because you can make really great friendships out of competitions. People for me like Martin, like Dan, they're guys I speak to all the time, because I really value their friendships that we have cultivated as being competitors, and that's really important stuff. Practical things like here's a website where you can go and buy tiny 3 centiliter bottles of spirits, so you don't have to buy a full bottle to try a recipe out. Send me an email, drop me a tweet. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Get some help as well, seriously, because trying to compete on your own is impossible. You need that team around you. Yeah. So when I was in Shanghai, for example, I was on my own. The SCA didn't have budget to send anybody. My employer didn't have budget to send anybody. I didn't have budget to bring anybody. So I went to Shanghai alone, and it was really hard. And find some help. Find some people who've got loads of money who want to come and help you.
Good advice. Why do you think people compete, like, especially now in 2022? Why do people do it?
I think there's a few people out there who want to compete because they want to show that they're the best. And unfortunately, most of those people aren't the best. So, pretty much by definition, most of the people who try to be the best aren't. So a load of people do it for that reason. Other people will want to promote a particular brand they're working with, or a roaster they're working for, and that's really valid. Some people want to learn. Some people want to get a bit more experience, a bit more knowledge, and that's tremendous. And some people are just born that way. Some people just have that itchy competitive streak and can't quit, can't give it up. You see them in kind of international competitions again and again and again, the same faces coming up, because they just can't let it go. They can't drop it. They've just got to keep going. And I'm as guilty as anyone for that, because I bought a coffee to compete with, and then the pandemic hit and it never got used, and it ended up being the coffee that Aaron competed with last year.
Yeah. And he got exceptional scores with that coffee.
That was a hell of a coffee, that one. That was going to be my world championship coffee, but I never got there. But yeah, I was ready to go back again.
I've got 20 grams of that coffee in my freezer at home, actually. I'm just waiting for the right time.
Actually, can I show you something?
Yeah.
I found this in a warehouse that was been lost. This is my competition coffee from 2014.
I was going to say, it looks like a geisha, right?
Yeah, that is Los Lajones Geisha Natural from 2014. So that coffee is now 8 years old. Now, when you roast that coffee, if you cup it 8 hours off roast, it's absolutely delicious. If you cup it 24 hours off roast, it's undrinkable.
Amazing.
But I have a little glimmer in the back of my head that coffee, maybe 9 or 10 years old, could be a competition coffee for me if I could roast it the morning of the competition or in the practice time before I go on stage.
There was a World Barista Championship competitor a few years ago, I think Italian, Andre, I'm not going to butcher his surname.
And Andre Eiermann, I believe, who I think is Swiss, actually.
Yes. And he roasted his I think it was the coffee either for his espresso or his cig drink on an Akawa on stage during his routine, which is really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the other bit of advice I'd give people is steal other people's ideas, because other people have really good ideas.
Yeah.
And it's a lot easier to steal half a dozen ideas from other people than to come up with your own.
Yeah, do your homework. When I was competing, I watched so many videos from so many years, and I'm definitely gonna do that. I'm gonna take a bit of that. I'm gonna change that.
Yeah, do your homework and research is a far more professional way of saying steal other people's ideas than steal other people's ideas. So yeah, good work there. Well done.
So 2 more scripted questions, off topic from coffee and competitions. What's your guilty pleasure, Dave?
My guilty pleasure is that when I'm traveling, I drink Starbucks caramel lattes because it's a good approximation of acceptable quality coffee when you can't get them. So if I'm on a long motorway journey or if I'm traveling through airports, a Starbucks caramel latte is my guilty pleasure. And there's some science behind this. So when you have really dark roast coffee, what it does is it takes sweetness out and replaces it with bitterness. So you need to do something to correct that. And Starbucks are really good at this because they correct that with syrup all the time. Caramel is a flavor that is found naturally in coffee. And so if you take a really dark roasted coffee that's lost its sweetness, rebalance it with a bit of sugar and the flavor of caramel, you have something that tastes a little bit like decent coffee, even though it isn't. Although the raw materials for Starbucks are actually pretty good.
You know, Starbucks are just out here dishing out harmonious balance all down the motorways.
And the beautiful flavors of pumpkin spice as you go. So yeah, that's my guilty pleasure. I still drink Starbucks, probably, I don't know, twice a month or something.
Excellent. So what's next for you, Dave? What are you excited about? What's coming up?
So Danelaw is growing. I'm about to launch my special Christmas blend, which I'm really excited about. I've got some really cool coffees coming in from producers that I've worked with in the past that are good friends. And I can't wait to get those out there and share those with people. So watch this space for more Danelaw stuff coming soon. And hey, you know, if there's someone out there who wants to compete with an 8-year-old geisha, I've got some. I don't really have time to compete myself, but you know, if there's someone out there who wants to come and work with me and run a competition with me, I'd love to have someone chat and help somebody out. So yeah, look out for Danelaw in a coffee shop near you soon. If you've got a coffee shop and you want some Danelaw in it, come and give us a shout. And that's what I'm really excited about. I'm loving having my own roastery. It's really cool to see my name above the door and kind of go in and know that it's my space to do what I want with and make my own stupid mistakes rather than having to deal with someone else's stupid mistakes all the time.
Amazing. It's really enjoyed chatting with you, Dave. Was there anything that you were hoping to talk about that didn't get brought up?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we've covered loads of stuff. Nice to kind of exercise those demons about 2017 because you know, it's been a bit of a mysterious story out there. And I'm quite happy to put that on record and you know, share that story. No, I think it's good stuff. Looking forward to hearing the podcast when it comes out.
It's been a really good chat. Thank you so much.
No problems. Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's been great.
Great. Well, I'll catch you soon.
Yes. Thanks, buddy.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, mate. Speak to you later.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Hello Judges. I really enjoyed talking with Dave about his competition experiences, and I think there was a lot of super useful insight into what it takes to succeed. My guest next week is Diana Johnston Ledesma from Sensit London and Saint Espresso and Roastery. I hope I pronounced her surname right. Diana, sorry if you're listening. Make sure you subscribe to stay up to date. We're on Spotify, Apple, all the usual podcast places. Just search Hello Judges Podcast. Or on Instagram, you can find us at Taylors Discovery. It's been a pleasure to share this podcast with you today, from the producing end in Yorkshire to your listening end, wherever you might be. Thank you. Time.